Good afternoon. My name is Ken with Granger Medical, and I'm here to do the training on the air system and the vacuum system. We'll start with the air system, and I'm going to give you the level of training that applies to the users and or the average maintenance person to do daily checks by to make sure the system is functioning properly. The first thing you want to focus on is the HMI screen. Now the HMI screen is the human-machine interface screen. This screen will tell you if everything's okay with the system and or if there's a problem, a local alarm, or any type of problematic condition that needs to be dealt with immediately. The screen shows you the pressure. The screen shows you the pressure that's in the vessel, the receiver tank. That is the current pressure, the digital reading on that. It shows you the carbon monoxide level, which is 0 parts per million, which is what you want. It shows you the active dew point, which is being dried by one of these two dryers here to the left. And it shows you the system status, which is okay. If you touch system status, you'll see no red indicators, so everything is good. Now if you go back to home on the HMI screen, you'll see P1, which is pump 1 or compressor 1, and you'll see P2, which is pump 2 or compressor 2. These two compressors will alternate every time one comes on, which only one will ever run at a time. When it satisfies, it'll become the reserve and the other one will become the lead, and when that one runs after it satisfies, it'll become the reserve and the other one will become the lead. Automatic alternation back and forth ad nauseum. The status of the pumps are okay. That means there's no high temp situations, there's no fault issues, everything's good. And over here to the far right, you'll see the hours that are accumulating on the pumps as they run. Right now each compressor has 1 hour. Normally these should change incrementally, and as one gets 2 hours and the next one will get 2, and so on and so forth. These should always be very close in number. If you start seeing a vast difference between one or the other one, that means a pump isn't running properly. We'll want to check out why that is. The system comes with a 2-year warranty from the manufacturer. From startup, today we did the startup. I'll submit the official startup documents to the manufacturer, and now your warranty starts today. Info here. These are bits of information that might be helpful. The horsepower is 7.5. The voltage is 460, 3 bays, there's 2 pumps, and the serial number is 8751. You go back to home, you hit service. That's the 800 number for Amico. We are the authorized Amico service rep in the area. We would do the service if you wanted to contract service on the system. Not necessary, but if you want to, happy to do it. The service interval at 500 hours, so every 500 hours you're going to get a service reminder. At that point you're going to want to make sure it's getting serviced or service it yourself, but every 500 hours where it says status okay, you're going to get a service reminder. Now if I touch into P1, it'll say temperature okay, which means it's not running hot. Next service hours is 400. I'm going to reset this right now and show you how to do that. You touch the reset button here on the panel, and then you touch here with your other finger until 500 appears. I just reset the service reminder. Then I go to pump 2 detail, and I'll do the same thing. Touch the reset button, touch the service reminder. Now it's reset to 500. And if you get the attention required where it says okay, that just means the service reminder is counted down, much like a odometer on a car, or your instrument panel tells you maintenance required. Same thing. Once you reset that, that'll take attention required away and put it back onto OK. So the other thing I'll show you is your start and stop. Your lead compressor comes on at 80 psi, kicks off at 100 psi. The reserve compressor will come on at 75 and kick off at 95. You should never have 2 compressors running at once. One will always run and one will always be in reserve, and they'll always automatically alternate. Your dew point right now is 31 degrees. The refrigerated dryers will probably manage your dew point somewhere between that temperature and the low 40s. We have changed the dew point setup to be 45 degrees for a high dew point alarm, as shown here. You can manipulate that by touching it and changing that or whatever. We're going to put it back to 45, 450, hit enter, it's back to 45. So at 45, you're going to get a high dew point alarm. Come around here, please. So if you look at the valves on the tank side here, just focus in on those if you could right there, those valves. you'll notice this valve is off. That valve should always stay off. That's your bypass valve. That valve is off. The air has to go in on this side of the tank, come out on this side of the tank, making the receiver tank trap any moisture and get rid of it. If this valve were open, you would pass the hot wet air right into the dryer. So if you have a dew point high issue, the first thing you want to do is check to make sure the bypass valve is off. This valve right here. So they should be perpendicular to the piping. Always make sure that stays that way. If anybody changes that, you could see a high dew point condition. Notice when the air comes away from the receiver tank, it comes into the dryer skid. One of these is valved on, the other one is valved off. You always want one on and one off, never both on or both off. Always one on and one off. Now you can alternate these annually, would be the proper course of method. When you alternate it, you want to turn the dryer on. Now the on switches, they're facing each other. But notice how this is lit green, that's off, that's on. You want to turn that dryer on and leave it on if it's valved on. You want to turn it off and leave it off if it's valved off. So this one currently is off, this one's on. Down here in between the dryers you have a valve that's open, and you'll hear a slight hissing sound coming out of this orifice down here. We want to hear that constantly. That's allowing fresh air to pass by the dew point probe, which is right here. That dew point probe is giving you the accurate real-time dew point reading on the display on the HMI screen. If you're to valve this off like that, the hissing stops, but then your dew point's going to go up, and it's not a real dew point. You're going to get a high dew point alarm. So if somebody tightens that hissing so it stops or valves that off, you could get a high dew point. You will get a high dew point and not know why you're getting it. So you always want to make sure you hear a slight hissing sound right there, and you want to make sure that valve's on. You have a test port valve right here where you can bleed air off for some reason you want it to. And you have your carbon monoxide flow meter here, which should be set at 1.5 on the scale. You don't need to mess with this, just make sure that's on, make sure this is off, and again, this is your test port if you want to bleed some air off. On a weekly cycle at a minimum, I would open up this orifice on the dryer that's open. This one's not open, but I would open up this, you turn it clockwise, and you can allow air to bleed out, moisture if there is any, and turn that off. And I do the same on this side on the active dryer, which would be that one. It's a little stiff. You might have to use pliers the first couple times until you loosen it up. But you want to make sure this isn't trapping water, because the only way for the water to get out of there is to manually drain it. And I would say the minimum, check it weekly. And that's about it. It's going to come on and off automatically. I'll demonstrate that. If you watch the HMI screen with your camera, I'm going to open this up and we'll watch this come on automatically. It's going to fire on at 80. Right now it's at 84. On the HMI screen, you'll see that number 2 is the lead, so this will light up green and number 2 will run. And when that satisfies, you'll see number 1 become the lead and number 2 will become the reserve pump. You'll watch this satisfy at 100 psi. There's a 3-second delay on the start and the stop, so it's going to come on at 79 and change, and it's going to satisfy at a little over 100. Watch the pressure build on this display until it gets to 100.1 or 2, 3 maybe, and you'll see that the running pump will become the reserve pump and the reserve pump will become the lead pump. Just watch that, and that'll complete the training on the air compressor system. So it's just satisfied. Now notice the alternation. P1 is now the lead, P2 or compressor 2 is the reserve. And just around the side here, I want to show you one other thing. That's reading 100. You have an analog gauge here also in case you want to check your analog pressure. That's also at 100. So the receiver tank has a relief valve and a gauge. and the digital display should correlate with the analog display. We have air intake filters here. It wouldn't be a bad idea maybe once a month to pop the filter off and check the condition, cover off and check the condition of the filter to make sure it's not got crud on it or whatever. I left my business card with Martin Loomis. If you have any questions or want to talk about a service contract, please give us a call on the information on the business card.